This year is very unusual because the whole country is engaged in what seems to be a fairly significant heat wave, which has caused fires starting in Alberta, northeast British Columbia, then you went to Nova Scotia, and now you've got Quebec on fire. And you've had Saskatchewan, Northwest Territories, various parts of the country are all active in wildfire right now, which in my career, it's unprecedented. We have a system in Canada of resource sharing, which is coordinated by the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center. They are kept abreast of the fire situation in each province and what resources could be available to be transferred across the country. And they have 5 levels of preparedness, or it's not even preparedness, it's how busy they are. And we're already at their highest stage, which is 5, which means that resources are largely committed all across the country. And you're seeing agencies like Quebec, like Alberta, calling for help because their fire situation is quite dire, and they're looking internationally. So we have, historically, in BC, for example, we've called upon Australia, we've called upon South Africa, we've had Mexico here to help us. The problem when you bring in these international groups, there's training, there's logistics, there's making sure they're aligned with the way you deal with fire suppression. So the reality is they help in some ways. BC also has a contract community that it relies on type 1, type 3 contractors who they can bring in to do mop-up or some fire control. But eventually what happens is when the fire load across the country, or in multi-countries like the US has lent us resources this year, but once their fire season starts, they'll be pulling those resources back. We may see that we don't have the resources that different jurisdictions would like to have. And that could be a possibility this year. Certainly it's moving in that direction. And ultimately the government can call in the military, as it has in Alberta. The military has been called in BC in the past. So the military also is an option. The RCMP is also engaged in evacuation. And in BC, we've had multiple municipal fire agencies help when we get big interface fires. So there is a lot of resources available, but when we get these large, difficult fires, when we get numerous fires affecting multiple communities, it does cause resource shortages. And I think, like any other business in Canada right now, there are labor shortages. And whether BC or Alberta has its full complement of firefighters that it would be willing to hire is really, are there those resources interested in firefighting anymore, and do they get their full complement? So there's this labor shortage, like any other business, is affecting things. When BC was on fire in 2021, we called resources from everywhere. And fortunately, I think we got most of what we need, or we survived with what we got. Now the question is, if Nova Scotia stays burning, Alberta stays burning, Quebec starts burning, and if Ontario started burning, that's going to draw helicopters, it's going to draw firefighters, and then BC starts a couple weeks later. Are there going to be enough firefighters or enough equipment per se? I don't think anybody really knows. I mean, BC also has the possibility that they could call in members of the forest industry here, and they have a large complement of equipment. But I think probably one of the biggest resources that will become scarce is helicopters, because helicopters are a staple for firefighting. Air tankers typically are contracted by each jurisdiction, and there is availability of air tankers. But again, once you get multiple fires burning across large regions, these logistics and control problems are exacerbated by shortages in resources.